The Oracle of Luna is a podcast with me, Bridget Engels, as your host. Here we have conversations with real live, present-day goddesses who are actively and courageously doing their magical work in the world. Each episode is a bewitching journey with relevant discussions on topics such as Wiccan pagan spirituality, writing, culture, magical practices, art, ritual, and the craft in its many forms. Merry meet! Welcome to another episode of the Oracle of Luna podcast. I'm Bridget Engels, your host, and today I am thrilled to chat with Judika Illes. Judika is a lifelong student, lover, and practitioner of the magical arts. She is the author of many, many books, including Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells, Encyclopedia of Spirits, Pure Magic, Daily Magic, Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, and her latest book, Witches, a Compendium. Judika is a professional tarot card reader as well as an aromatherapist. She is a native New Yorker, and Judika teaches in the U.S. and internationally, online and in person. Welcome, Judika.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, so how's your day going?
Oh, it's going. It's a day.
And you're back east, right? So New York.
Yeah, I am in New Jersey where
Oh.
surprisingly we're having fires. I used to live in California and we associate wildfires with California, or I do, but um, we've got them here in New Jersey too.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh.
capital state. So
Yeah. Well, I hope they resolve that soon for all concerned. So we have a lot to unpack here, so I'm just gonna get rolling. How's that?
sure,
All
perfect.
right. My first question, I usually start out the show with my guests, is how did your journey with the magical arts begin? Can you?
It's funny because I'm asked that all the time, and I mean, it's a true standard answer, but I've actually been thinking about it a lot since the publication of my book and the fact that I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately, and that question always comes up. And my standard answer is I arrived this way. I don't remember a time when I wasn't interested in the magical arts, wasn't interested in witchcraft, divination. It I don't have like a moment where that aha moment that people sometimes have where this is the turning point, the epiphany. I have always been like this. But, you know, I have been thinking about this, and partly I think it is time and place. I grew up in a family where material about the magical arts was available. I learned to read very, very young. I learned to read at age 3 because my mother taught herself English by teaching me to read.
Hmm.
And we had books in the house. And I'm the only child in a family of adults. My 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 sister is 12 years older than me, and she's the closest in age. My other cousins are even older. So I was not really I was not really treated like a child. And
Yeah.
we had, you know, I mean, I I read The Valley of the Dolls. Nobody explained it to me. Nobody read
Wow.
The Godfather. No, nobody would, if I didn't understand something, that was on me. Like no one was going to explain it, but no one stopped me either.
Yeah.
So, no one said, "Oh, you can't read that."
But they
And
encouraged you to read.
it, it was, oh yeah, yeah. I come from a family of readers. Everybody reads. My father read, and I know a lot of men don't read. My father, loved a short story, loved Somerset Maugham. So
Hmm.
I had the material to stoke my interest. I had a mother who loved fairy tales and who read me and told me fairy tales like forever. And she told them to me in such a way, I always identify with the witch. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like Hansel and Gretel because it's a story about killing a witch. But
Mm-hmm.
my mother also, she had admiration for the witches. So that was there. And I was also, really lucky that my age, I was born, I was a small child when Bewitched was first on the air, the Addams Family.
Mm.
And those were really revolutionary
Yeah, they
shows.
were bewitched too. Yeah.
People don't necessarily appreciate it, but Witch was the first show, the first entertainment that was really not ambivalent about its starring witch. Samantha is the heroine, and she's good, and she's beautiful, and she's kind, and she's smart. And that was, very revelatory to me. And
Yeah.
I got to see it at a very, at a very influential age. And I love Morticia Adams.
Yeah.
Gilligan's Island, there's an episode where Ginger does some divination, and all these things really fueled, fueled my
Yeah.
passion for it. But that was who I was going to be.
Yeah, right. They're
Right? That
role
was,
models.
I knew that. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
definitely.
Who influenced you the most on your journey as a witch, becoming a witch? Do you have any?
There's not one person.
Yeah.
I know people who have mentors or the one person, and I have a number of people I don't really one.
Sure.
I was also a child when Sybil Leek came out with Diary of a Witch, and I saw her on TV. And those things were they were very encouraging to me. I think there's a better word, but I can't think of it right now. They Seeing Sybil Leek, and she would go on, Merv Griffin show, and she carried herself with so much dignity. There's, and people treated her with respect, even if they made jokes. She was the one with the power. So she made a big impression on me, and I read a lot of her books. I saw Helena Blavatsky was in the cover of McCall's magazine.
Wow.
Oh yeah, they had an episode, I want to say 68, 69, an episode they had what do you call it? An issue
Yeah.
that came out, and it was like a look at the occult. And Helena Blavatsky
Ooh.
was on the cover. My mother had a subscription. And it was really the first time I saw somebody on the cover of a magazine that looked like she could be my relative. And that was, very eye-opening. And all
Yeah.
the TV witches that I liked, the witches and songs that I liked. I studied with Carol Murray, who is not, a celebrity, so-called a celebrity witch, but I studied with her for a while. She became, we were in a coven together. Her work is, if those who have Stanley Kaplan's third tarot encyclopedia, her work is in that book. She was a designer of tarot cards and a tarot reader in New York City, and she was a big influence on me.
So when did you decide to become an author, or were you always thinking of writing or doing writing when you're young?
I never expected to become an author of occult
Really?
or metaphysical
Hmm.
books, but writing is my skilled labor, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Writing is what I can do.
Yeah.
You know, I had to learn English, and I studied really hard, but as it took a long time to really master it, and to, part of that was learning how to be a good writer. And I mean, some of that may be genetics. I come from, I come from an artistic family. They're artists and they're writers. So, maybe some of that is genetic. Um,
Yeah.
I wrote about music, like even in my teen years, like our high school newspaper, I wrote music reviews. And I will probably say that the writers who had the biggest impact on me as a writer were the music journalists of the 70s. Grant
Like Rolling
Marcus.
Stone.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, very Michael Gilmore and Grant Marcus, and just really Robert Christgau, some really wonderful Alan Willis, really wonderful writers, and they taught me how to, write with passion and to
Mm,
wear my heart in my sleeve,
hmm
to write about things that you love and let people share that love with you. So I eventually started writing and starting to publish things to no avail. Nobody wanted it. Um, but I I have a big unpublished manuscript that had a chapter of magic spells in it. It was not a book particularly about magic, but I tried to publish it and the publisher turned it down. But they liked that one chapter on the magic spells. And they asked, could I expand it? And I said, sure. I
Yeah,
could do that. And
yeah.
that's the book that eventually became Earth Mother Magic. That's my first published book. And that book has had a bunch of incarnations. It went out of print and then somebody else published it. It is now there. I mean, it means a lot to me. It's now, I think maybe the last version, the most recent version, it's the Wiser Classic Edition of Pure Magic, which came out maybe 2 years ago.
So
And
when did
it's
Earth Mother Magic come out first?
Oh God, that book was supposed to be published by um the original Element books before they went bankrupt, but then they went bankrupt. So I started writing that book in maybe 1999. It was
Uh-huh.
supposed to come out in like 2000, but then the publisher went bankrupt. It was where was it going to go?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say it was finally published in 2002.
Hmm.
Uh,
And then
that's
after that, all these other books kind of started to
I
flow out.
wrote Pure Magic. I wrote Earth Mother Magic, and it's probably the most personal of all my books because I never really thought I'd have an opportunity to write another one. It was hard for me to get published. There were, already 20 billion books on, magic and spellcasting and witchcraft. I
Right.
had very low expectations. Like, there's an accent on my last name, but
Yeah.
my editor, which I never use professionally because my editor said, "Oh, Americans are afraid of accent marks." So I said, "Okay, like whatever." I just I didn't think I would be able to write another book or get another book published. And so I really put a lot of stuff in there that I love. A lot of music, a lot of New Orleans, um, the essential oils that I love, spells that I love, because I wanted to have that opportunity to share it. And then
Yeah.
And then actually, because I didn't think anybody would buy it, but then people did.
Yeah.
um, People did, and it got good reviews. And then the publisher asked me to write another book, which is now Magic When You Need It. So
Mm-hmm.
at that point, I was on fair winds. The editor and the publisher who had originally asked me to write the book had gone to Fair Winds. They started that imprint, and so I brought the book there. So I
Mm-hmm.
did two books with them, and they're now Pure Magic and Magic When You Need It for Wiser Books. And then I did 5,000 Spells, and that changed everything.
Tell us about that. What was the idea behind that? Like, did you have,
So,
yeah, because it's an encyclopedia, so you must have done a ton of research,
well, it
right?
wasn't initially supposed to be an encyclopedia. That book has a life of its own. So I did. So Greg Brandenburg, who had been the vice president at Element Books, the original Element before it became Harper Element, um, because HarperCollins bought it. He is the one who asked me to write Earth Mother Magic, and then I did. And then he left, but I was still at Fair Winds, and I did a book that was then called Emergency Magic, which was a little. The publisher again, they asked me to write that, and it's a witchcraft version of. Do you remember all the emergency books, last worst case scenarios? Worst case scenario survival guides. And they asked me to do kind of a worst case scenario witchcraft book. That so you have there are 151 spells in there. It's now
Yeah.
Magic When You Need It. The book is still available, although it no longer looks like a worst case scenario book. It 75 situations and two different spells for them. And Greg knew I wrote that book, but
Hmm.
Greg knew that I had been collecting spells for years.
Well, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. How did you become such an expert on witchcraft? I mean, you must have started
because
early in life, right?
because I am an obsessive, yeah, no, I'm not kidding. It's like all my life. I mean, I am a very, yeah, I got a Scorpio moon and I'm a very faithful person. I still have the same deck of tarot cards that the first deck of tarot cards I ever saw when I was 6 was the BOTA deck. And it's not the deck that I read from the most, but I have that deck. Uh, I've been reading about witches and witchcraft forever.
Yeah.
I've been, you start off playing with witchcraft and then, maybe you become a more serious practitioner as life comes at you. But I mean, this is my whole life, and you know, it's sort of a shocking thing. And I know I'm speaking to people out there. Like, in my heart, I might still be 15 years old, but my joints tell me I'm a
Yeah.
lot older than
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So I've just been doing this for a long time. And
Yeah.
what happened is, I mean, I have a big, the book that I initially tried to get published is, and maybe I will, every few years I try to get it published again. It's a big book on traditional methods of getting pregnant, a book of enhancing fertility. And it is actually, in hindsight, it is very much like a 5,000 spells. It's that size, formatted not that differently. And that's the book that was turned down in favor
Mm.
of a book with the chapter of magic spells. But he knew, but in during the years and years, because I was very actively researching different cultural methods of, what would your great great grandmother say in this country or that country or that culture or that other culture if you couldn't get pregnant? How would they, what kind of advice would they
Mm.
give you?
That's an interesting perspective or viewpoint. Yeah.
Well, so I had been doing that really actively. And when I first started doing it, I was doing it with blinders on. If it didn't apply to the topic, I just didn't pay any attention. But in the process of researching, I kept coming across all this interesting stuff.
Mm.
And it wasn't necessarily stuff I needed, but it was just
Mhm.
interesting. And
And one thing led to another, probably.
right, exactly. It's like Hansel and Gretel in the
Yeah.
trail of breadcrumbs. Follow the trail. And I started writing it. I mean, this is really pre-digital. I was writing it down on 3x5 note cards. And I, you know, have boxes and boxes and boxes of those. And Greg, who by this time had gone to Harper Element, he knew I had all these boxes. I'm a spell collector. I would just collect spells for myself just because I thought they were interesting. No other reason. Or because maybe someday somebody was going to ask me. It's the kind of thing like having an emergency stuff. Like you keep that can of soup in your kitchen because one day maybe I'm going to need it.
One day
I
that
mean,
3x5 will come in necessary, that rest
yeah,
part.
somebody somewhere is going to need this, and I'll be able to say, "Hey, look, I have, I have a spell for that." And so he knew, and so we started talking. He wanted to do a big spell book. It was not called an encyclopedia. It was going to be called, I think, either the Big Book of Spells or the Joy of Spell Casting. Um, and he, can you do a book? Because I had done 150 spells. Can you
Mm.
do one with 500 spells? Can you do one with 1,000 spells?
Right.
Can you do with 8,000 spells? And I kept saying, yeah, 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 because I was trying to sell him on another book. And, but he was very persistent and he knows me and
Hmm.
he hooked me. At the end, I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
I, he, I wanted to do something and I did. But,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's, it was, if I had gone to a publisher and said, I would like to do a book with 5,000 spells where the original edition will weigh over 5 pounds and Amazon won't do free shipping. I mean, they would have laughed at me. They would never have published it. That
Yeah.
was supposed to be a 450-page book. We didn't do the math. We we couldn't. He said
Wow.
to me, what do you think? 450 pages is a book. And I said, sure. Um, no one stopped to mathematically calculate how many spells can you squeeze onto a page.
So, Judika, you are such a prolific author, but you have a new book out, and was
Yeah,
hoping that you could tell us a little bit about your newest book, which is a compendium, and what this book explores.
it's I mean, what it is technically is a mini encyclopedia of witches. And somebody described it and I liked it. They described it as a love letter to witches, and that's also what it is. It is a book that expresses my love for witches and witchcraft and the topic and the people and you know, whether they're historical people, there's a couple living people in there. There are literary witches, movie witches, Agatha Harkness is in there, who, when I wrote it, I didn't realize it was going to be such a big deal, but here she is. Um, so it is. I mean, it's funny because I've because after I wrote 5,000 spells, I wrote a the publisher asked me to do another encyclopedia, and so I have a full size. It's like 800 pages, Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, and then I did two more encyclopedias. Encyclopedia of Spirits, maybe a little bit bigger than 5,000 spells. And for those who are not familiar with them, they're over 1,000 pages. And so to be able to write sort of a normal sized book, it it's fun.
I like it.
Actually,
I think people
yeah.
are time starved, and we want, personally, I like shorter books and read many of them at the same time, but that's
Yeah, I
just
do too. I
so,
do too. I usually have three or four of them at the same time. Plus, I'm an editor, so I'm always reading books that I'm working on. So,
right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, I love this book, and I like the chapter on famous witches. I like the entertainment witches, the Wicked Witch of the West. I mean, it's just fascinating. But yeah, it's really nice because I like to pick it up and read a few chapters and set it down and
Yeah.
and think about it and absorb what you've told us and written
Well,
about
there's a
it.
lot of little bite-sized pieces in
Yeah.
it, but I wanted to celebrate witches and to explore the diversity of witches and we're not monolithic, all the facets of witchcraft. And a lot of books look at witchcraft from a very narrow focus. Only certain years or only certain years. There's, oh my God, there's like you cannot count how many books are exclusively Northern and Western European traditions. And I wanted to break out of the box a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you have. I love this book.
Thank Hope
So
so.
are you,
Thank you.
what kind of witch are you? Mm,
I'm
Judika?
an independent eclectic witch.
Okay.
I answer to myself.
I do whatever I want.
I do
That's
I
great.
do what I want. There's like have you seen this like a meme? It's like a piece of like artwork. It shows you a cat like and it's like, I do what I want.
Yes, we do what we want.
I do my best. Life doesn't always let you do that, but I do my best to
Yeah.
do what I want.
Yeah. And what do you think a witch symbolizes in
Well,
now, currently? How
you
would,
have to. The problem with witches, and this is something I I explore more in the bigger in Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, is that the word witch, that one word, means a lot of different things. Like everybody thinks they know what a witch is, but then if you ask 20 people, they all come up with a different definition. And so people will ask me, "Are you a witch?" Or they'll tell me, "You're a witch." And I ask them, "What do you think a witch is?" Because if you think a witch is someone who desecrates cemeteries and eats babies, well, I'm not that kind of a witch for sure. um,
yeah.
I don't know if that is actually, is that even a witch? That might be something else if that actually exists. But I think witches are about power and independence ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that people will either love and often in a female form, And that is something that people will either love and perceive as positive, or some people find that very threatening.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are ambivalent. And I wrote witches for, I mean, other witch lovers, but also I think for people who are ambivalent. I
Yeah.
mean, people who are just sure, who we're all out eating babies. I mean, there's nothing to do about that. That's just, that's their own issues.
When you said that, I thought of Rosemary's Baby. Just that image came up, that movie.
Yeah, although, that is something, that book was actually very influential. I did not see the movie until I was an adult,
Yeah,
but
me
I
neither. Yeah.
but I read the book which is called Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. I read that. I had my cousin. We lived in the same building, the same apartment building, and she was an Ira Levin fan. And Ira Levin, wrote The Stepford Wives.
Oh, I
Boyfriend's.
didn't know that. Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, Ira Levin was
Wow.
a very best-selling author back in the '60s, early '70s. He has,
Yeah.
very much been forgotten. He was, and it's a good book, and it is very. You can see the movies hasn't changed a lot from the book. It's pretty
Yeah.
much the book. But I read that. I must have been, I don't know, maybe 10 years old when I read it.
Oh my
And
goodness. Very
and
young.
but I'm from New York.
Yeah,
So those are New York City witches.
that's
And
right. Oh.
I mean, I was ready to move in and join that coven. I'm not,
So are
but
you
that's not.
are you dedicated to any particular goddess or deity?
I am a person who is, I describe myself as spiritually promiscuous. I have many.
Yeah.
Um, but that's, we're all different. I know atheist witches who are not interested in that spiritual aspect. And I know people who are dedicated only to one sacred being. I would say for me, my primary is Lilith.
Mm.
She was the first sacred being with whom I had profound experiences and contact.
Mm-hmm.
So Lilith is, in my personal pantheon, she's up there. But I have, you know, in a different world, in a world where I was a single mother. I am a single mother. I mean, I have always been the caregiver. I'm a little bit Cinderella. I took care of my parents. I took care of my kids. I've always, I don't, I'm not a person who had a lot of leisure time. In
Yeah.
a different world, I mean, I would be a medium and I do nothing but work with spirits. That is
Mm.
my favorite, the most profound and elevating experience that I can think of. And so, I mean, you can't
Hmm.
see me right now, but I mean, I've got my Medusa earrings on. Medusa's always very close to my heart. But
Yeah.
and I mean, I think you can tell a lot. I mean, if you read my books, you can tell who,
Yeah.
have a soft spot for. I have a soft spot for, you know,
E-
angry, angry,
Egyptian
raging.
Egyptian pantheon goddesses.
Yeah, definitely. Segment.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So Judika, we're running out of time here, but what are some of your upcoming plans for the future? Do you have any new books on the horizon or
I
workshops?
do. No, yes, no. I have a deck of little cards, if you can believe it. Notebook. It's already up for pre-order. If you look online, it's called Protection Spells, and it's a little mini deck of
Oh,
cards
I love
that
that.
I've worked on together with the creative director at Wiser Books. We worked on the Wiser Tarot together, and then we've done this little deck of protection spells. And I have books in my head, and we're gonna see how they work out. Because to I don't self-publish,
Yeah.
so I I have to have a publisher. I have to, we have to work all those things out. The spells I think will be available for purchase maybe next May, next June, something like that.
Is it
It's an
tarot or
oracle deck.
oracle deck?
It's
Okay.
an oracle deck. 36 cards that you can use in various ways, but they all have little protection spells on them.
Is there an artist that you work with on that?
With Catherine Skypack,
Okay.
who is the creative director of Red Will Weiser. And the cards are beautiful. They're snakes. I love snakes.
Woo!
They're
Yeah,
really gorgeous.
wait to see that. I'm a visual person, so I
Yeah,
love looking at oracle decks and looking at
yeah,
themes and what the how the artist interprets the theme.
yeah.
All right. Well, and finally, Judika, do you have a website or blog or social
I
media?
do, and it's down or it's damaged. So I mean, and and I'm just I'm just slow. I do a lot of stuff, and everything is slow.
Yeah.
But it will be fixed. But I'm all over the web. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, which, for me, it's Twitter. It's not whatever X. Um, I'm not hard to find. But
Instagram, is it just under your name
yeah,
or
Judika Illes, Judikailles.
wonderful? This has certainly been fascinating. I could have talked for hours with you, Judika.
We could.
Such an amazing person and author. And I just thank you for being on the show and thank you
Thank you for having me.
for all your sacred writing and books and expertise on witchcraft and the spiritual world and magical arts and just inspiring us to connect with the craft and spirits and finding the witch within us. So thank you.
Thank you,
Uh,
Bridget.
yeah, blessed be, and thanks to all our listeners out there for joining us today. All right. Until next time. Bye bye.